to ASEAN People Speak Season 2. I'm Regine Jessica Abuel, your host for this podcast. We will be joined tonight by a human rights and democracy expert in Indonesia and ASEAN. He will share with us his experience and learning during the first and second term of the ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights, or AICHR. For 30 years, he has been lobbying and advocating for human rights, democracy, and humanitarian issues in Indonesia in both intergovernmental bodies and UN human rights mechanisms. Currently, he is one of the founders of the Human Rights Working Group, a permanent coalition of Indonesian NGOs for international human rights advocacy based in Jakarta, and a former regional director for Southeast Asia and Pacific of Amnesty International. He is a member of the advisory board of the Association for the Prevention of Torture, or APT, and has served as the first Indonesian representative for the ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights, or AICHR, from 2009 to 2015. He has held the position of chairman of AICHR in 2011. He served as the convener of the Solidarity for Asian People's Advocacy and of the Task Force of ASEAN and Human Rights. He received his master's degree in development studies in 1989 from the Institute of Social Studies in The Hague, Netherlands. Ladies and gentlemen, it is our honor to welcome and say hi to our speaker from Indonesia. Let us welcome Mr. Rafendi Djamin. Hello, Mr. Rafendi.
Hello, ASEAN people. Good to see you.
It's nice to have you with us tonight, Mr. Rafendi. How are you? You're in Indonesia, right?
Yes, I'm in Indonesia and based in Indonesia.
Wonderful. So how is everything there so far? Are the health protocols easing up already? Because I think, although there is still the pandemic, things are slightly getting better for all of us.
That's true. Although now we're getting used with the mask, and I think it's good because Jakarta is very highly polluted now. Right? It's better to wear mask rather than without mask.
Yes, so I think it serves as not just prevention for the COVID virus, but also a health measure to prevent us from getting smoke or other forms of pollution. So that's very nice. Anyway, Mr. Rafendi, we'll be talking about the ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights tonight, or AICHR, which, as I've mentioned a while ago, you were part of this organization. Mr. Rafendi, as one of the first AICHR representatives, can you share with us your experience and maybe the initial priority of AICHR during the first and second terms when you were a representative from Indonesia? Were there challenges in achieving these goals?
Okay, thank you, Rich. Yes, as a background, which is becoming very interesting, my background is not a government officials. So it was already introduced by Reg very generously that my background is more in the civil society sector. Mm-hmm. I've never worked with the Indonesian government as an officials, but in that period of 2009, I was then elected through a open and fair election process. So it's not appointment process. It is an election process, not like other member states of ASEAN who just appoint their representative to the AICHR, but the Indonesian process is going through a very open process. So you have to apply for that position, and then you have gone through several stages of process. And this is actually not exactly written in the TOR of AICHR. It depends on the member state themselves, whether they are going to involve people from a different background, right?
Mhm.
So in the Indonesian case, we are one of the member states who are promoting that member of the ASEAN Commission, in the Governmental Commission of Human Rights, should come from different background. Yeah, and
Mhm.
one of them, of course, from the civil society background, which is focusing and advocating, working on the issue of human rights. So that's what happened with my case. So when I came to the club, I call it club. Well, it's a group of
Mhm.
10 representatives. Most of my colleagues are very high level government officials. They are
Oh. Mhm.
minister. They're under the minister, most of them. And I think it was only me. I'm the only one who came from the activist background.
From the
That's a
CSOs. Oh, that's interesting.
yes. The other one, which is coming from CSO, it's more from the academy. I was from
Oh,
China.
okay. So you're the one coming from the ground. I mean,
Well,
from,
maybe I'm not really the ground.
but yeah.
At least I'm coming from middle class, but then I'm coming from the human rights activist background.
Mhm.
That's a different. And because of that position, that is already making something very difficult for me and for others. They are not used to communicate openly, or it took quite a long time to really adjust with myself, to adjust, to discuss with colleague at a high level position in the
Yes.
government,
Yes.
and I'm a kind of very open, free person.
Mhm.
I can say whatever what I want to say. I can I can talk from my heart. Whatever I think. So then I myself learn a lot. In that process. To become getting more wiser, because you
Mm.
need to build. The first thing to do, you need to build a trust
Mhm.
among the colleague, right?
Yes.
So and it was not easy. Actually, the first 3 years, I spent a lot of time to adjust my time. And when should I actually push the thing that I wanted
Oh,
to the table, for example. Let
that's
alone,
very interesting.
yeah,
That's very
let alone,
interesting. Sorry. That's very interesting, Mr. Rafendi, because I believe some member states actually have government officials or ambassadors actually that represent their state in AICHR. On the part of Indonesia, which is your country, you were coming from the CSO, and I think this gives a very good mix, or this gives a very good perspective also in terms of seeing issues in different ways, not just in a government aspect but also in a CSO aspect.
yes, exactly. Well, this won't happen without the intention or without the openness of the Minister of Foreign Affairs at that time.
Mm.
It was for Minister Hassan Wirayuda. He really wanted to have a representative representing the Indonesian government from civil society in the ASEAN. So that was really his what he will at that time. And finally, he made it. I mean, he made it. He made me
Yeah.
there,
Yeah.
through the process of selection. So the biggest challenge is actually then to communicate and to build trust, and then how to navigate bringing sensitive issues into the discussion, and then even try to avoid that your idea will be immediately blocked, even before
Mm.
starting any discussion. So
Yes.
that was quite difficult for the first 3 years. And one thing I think I can remember very strongly, that it was a time that we were making, as a new organization, you need to have rules and regulation, rules
Mhm.
of procedures from an organization. So after the TOR as the basis of the rules, then you need to have rules of procedures for different matters. on financial, on how we do the meeting, how do we organize the relationship with civil society, with the other sectorial body of ASEAN. We need to have a rules of procedures. And during that negotiation of rules of procedures, I remember it was it was a stalemate. It was that my idea was not accepted at all, and then the negotiation was stopped. So there was no negotiation. Okay, we can go along without rules. Look at the General Assembly, UN. I think it was mentioned about Security Council. UN Security Council has any rules of procedure, so we can have it something like that, so that was the time. I think it was blocked by 2 other member states, that doesn't want to talk anymore about that subject. So,
but how were you able to navigate that then during that time? I mean, considering that that idea was already blocked.
Yes, then it has to be done through a negotiation outside of the formal meeting. So that means
so there are negotiations going outside. I mean, there are ongoing negotiations outside the forum.
Yes, then you try to approach and try to reach, try to agree on common interests, common understanding, and then finally everybody agrees, to begin again the negotiation on the rules of procedures. Although then the name was changed. It's not ROP anymore, but something like AICHR's guideline, something like that.
Okay.
But the content is basically the same.
Yes. But I guess maybe it's just the nomenclature that gives a lighter impact compared to the rules of procedure. But basically, the idea is the same. It's just that even the name itself or the nomenclature you have to negotiate and have to agree with, because it has to be something that all the member states would have to agree with. Correct?
Yeah.
Well,
that's true.
Given that, Mr. Rafendi, during your first and second term then as an ASEAN representative, you've mentioned that you've encountered a lot of challenges. But then I can see, and you've been sharing with us how you're able to overcome them. Can you share with us also some highlights or some of the major achievements also of AICHR during the time that you were serving as a representative?
All right.
And maybe also during the time when you were a chair.
Oh yeah, okay. During my chair, I was really trying to be a good chair, but
I'm sure you were.
No. Wait a minute.
Okay.
But actually, I regret that I was really trying to be good. Why do I regret? Because as a chair, your main purpose is actually to facilitate the meeting, so the outcome will be the negotiation can go smoothly, and the outcome and the product can get as much as possible in a certain period of time, right? But during the negotiation, I never use my voice as as a representative of Indonesia. I'm always acting as a chair, So I only learned that was a mistake from my side. Actually, I could play 2 roles, by saying, okay, now I'm talking as representative of Indonesia, not as a chair. Then you can say whatever you want, So these are the things that I think I regret I never do it. But nevertheless, I've done, I think, a lot of things achieved during the chairmanship, my chairmanship. For example, when we are trying to kind of reconcile with another institutions on human rights in ASEAN, which is the ASEAN Commission and Women and Children. The establishment of AICHR and the ASEAN Commission on Women and Children, it was only a difference of 6 months. All of a sudden, ASEAN has 2 bodies of human rights. One is the AICHR, the general one, and the other one is ACWC. So then, there was some kind of misunderstanding where to put these two things and how to get along together. You know,
Yes.
one will claim, well, I am the organ higher than you,
Yes.
something like that. So then during my chair, I think I was able to really make the first useful meeting, a kind of reconcile meeting between AICHR and HWC. So then we came along with, because we have to work together
Yes,
as
definitely. I
body
mean,
of
both of
ASEAN.
you, yes, both of you are working under ASEAN and promoting human rights.
Exactly.
But Mr. Rafendi, given that, was there then a delineation or something that you would have to define then what are the responsibilities or what's under your organization as AICHR and then what is under ASEAN Commission on the Promotion and Protection of the Rights of Women and Children? Is there now?
It's a very simple things, the ACWC is coming from different sectoral bodies. It comes from the pillar of social and cultural cooperation. And AICHR came out from the political bodies of ASEAN cooperation. So AICHR is more political. It's more political, you see. So within AICHR term of reference, there is also a term, the so-called AICHR is an overarching institution in the whole ASEAN. So understanding overarching, we need to come to agreement with our colleague from ACWC at that time. Overarching, it doesn't mean that you are under me. We are equal, but then at least in terms of human rights, we are covering the whole issue. So you, as human rights, you can also talk about women's rights and children's rights, right?
Yes,
it's not ACWC as a kind of a monopoly of the issue of women's rights and children's rights. So this kind of thing will have to be adjusted and understood together. So I think I achieved in my first year in that chairpersonship.
That's very nice. Yes, another thing that you would like to, but that's very nice. Just on that note, Mr. Rafendi, it's very nice that you've clarified then how it is that it's not supposed to be this is yours and this is mine, but something that we work together and not just that, but recognizing that AICHR was an overarching organization, but at the same time it works and it is equal as ACWC. So thank you for pointing that out and clarifying. You were saying, sir?
Yeah,
you were going to mention another one.
Quite strong, an achievement for the first 6 years, because our task is laying the ground, for a strong institutionalization process in the next 10 years. And now it is already more than 10 years, right?
Yes.
So in that period, the most important process of negotiation is to reach an understanding about what human rights are and what democracy is and what civil society are. There are different understanding, interpretation among member states about civil society, for example. And then there are different level of understanding about how human rights should be implemented at the national level. So that's why negotiation in terms of drafting the Declaration of Human Rights of ASEAN, AICHR, I think that's one of the biggest achievements during my period. Because although a lot of critics, our colleague from the other member state will always like this word, the outsider criticizing us. I don't like the word outsider. I said, well, our friend, international community, we have external relations. They've been criticizing the Declaration of ASEAN is watering down the international agreed human rights standard. Then I tried then to argue back. No, it is not. It is not it is as what you think, and
Mhm.
and that is the process which I think very good. And now at least, although not all member states of ASEAN are a state party of the core Human Rights Convention, there are about
Mhm.
9 core Human Rights Convention, and not all of them, not all 10 member state countries are member of that core convention. But with the AHRD, then any rights you can talk about, you can discuss about it at the ASEAN without
Mm.
subscribing or without having a fact of a member state of, for example, conventions against torture.
Mhm.
It's from all 10 member states. But in the AHRD, torture is prohibited. You know,
Yes, yes.
freedom of belief. You know, not everybody, not the member state of ASEAN is state party of the Convention on Civil and Political Rights. But
Mhm.
then the AHRD stipulates the civil and political.
Covers. Yes.
So
That's
then
very nice.
about all human rights and the ASEAN context.
Yes.
Don't
That's
say
very
in a way, no, we are not state party of that convention. We don't want to talk about that. So that's the good thing to have the Declaration of Human Rights. That's the biggest.
yes. And I would definitely consider that as a very, very big achievement for ASEAN, not just for AICHR, I guess, but for ASEAN as a whole. You mentioned a very good point there, Mr. Rafendi, that if some member states are not actually state parties or signatories to a certain convention, under the ASEAN Human Rights Declaration, these certain things are embedded in these certain rights are embedded in this declaration. Therefore, somehow they are supposed to respect that. Correct?
Yes. Not only respect and then protect and promote those rights.
Yes, yes. Not just respect, but protect and promote. Yes, that's a very good point that you mentioned. Um, Considering that, Mr. Rafendi, we would like to ask then now, were there other, that's a very nice point that you've mentioned. And the experiences that you actually shared with us are very colorful and very enlightening, especially when you had to navigate or deal with different members when you were the chairman. Can you share with us then some things that you took away or some learnings that you have had during this whole AICHR experience? And I'd connect this to how is AICHR now? How has it
Yes.
changed
Yeah, I think
presently?
we've been talking quite some time now. I
Mhm.
think we are going to something like this. The lesson learned is you a process, an evolutionary process, is one of the good way. Don't push too much. Going to get something instantly. To get a process, step by step. Evolution is the good way to reach a common goal for the good and for the good of the ASEAN people and the institution. And then, as you see now, you compare now, when it was so difficult to discuss issues regarding making a plan of work plan which is more programmatic and will give an impact. It is much easier now to do that. Before, just kind of, okay, this article TOR term of reference function A, then you do activity based on that function. But now there is an ability to kind of, if you do something, if you make a program on A, for example, prevention of torture, then there should be another follow-up for that. That should be a follow-up not only at the regional, but also at the national level. So all of these things can be discussed easily in the work plan. Now, which is not the case before.
Oh, okay, okay. So back then, would you consider that it was very difficult in terms of negotiating certain human rights or human rights in general compared to how it is being promoted and protected at this in during these times?
Exactly. So it is the situation. It is less political because the first 3 and 6 years, everything, any ideas, a bit progressive ideas on human rights, then will be seen as something political.
Political or negative that's why
Negative.
it's being blocked when you
Yeah,
mentioned a
and
while
now
ago.
they
Oh.
understand this is for their own good, for the good as well of the member state. It's not like, for example, the mini UPR. Because one of the issues is protecting. One way of protecting within mechanisms is actually reviewing human rights situation in a country, right? So that
Mhm.
it is much more easier now, to discuss
Mhm.
about that because now you have a program of ASEAN Human Rights Dialogue. If you look at the work plan of the current
Mm.
AICHR, that is the opportunity to discuss a country situation with the consent of the country themselves. So it is something which has been built, based on what has been actually done in the first 3 or 6 years
Years.
of this system.
Yes. So I think on that note, I would like to commend you and the work of AICHR throughout the years. I like the point that you mentioned a while ago that human rights is actually a progressive a, it's not supposed to be something that you give on the table and then that's it, or it's a take it or leave it thing, but it's more of a progressive thing that certain ideas before are viewed as very political, but eventually, because people are becoming more and more open, member states are becoming more and more open, there is a progressive way now of viewing things. So certain issues are now being talked about freely, or not they're not being um, they're not being construed or seen as political or hidden
Yes,
agendas.
yes, exactly. So that's the good thing now we have, and I'm really looking forward for the further development of the AICHR, that we can already have a kind of complaint mechanisms was impossible
Yes.
at that time, but
Yes.
now we can already start, like sending a complaint on human rights violation of certain countries, and that will be
Yes.
accepted by the secretariat. It will be noted, and there will be time to discuss with the consent of the member state.
Member
While
states.
the
Yes.
first 3 6 years it was impossible.
Mm. So that gives us then some hope on certain matters also, or certain human rights issues that are at this point maybe not um, discussed yet thoroughly. But the point that you have given, Mr. Rafendi, is it brings hope to certain issues also, that some things are not, for example, the issues with regard to human rights violations of certain member states. If that was an issue before, maybe other states wouldn't do anything, or there are no mechanisms
Yes,
um to check, or
to
to
address.
maybe, now there are special rapporteurs, right? And
No, not really a special rapporteur. There is no
mhm.
special rapporteur yet, but there is a possibility to receive a complaint. Yeah.
Okay, I see. Thank you for that. Wow. Well, on that note, I guess before we end the program, is there anything that you would like to share to our viewers, to our listeners, before we end the
Sure,
program,
sure.
regarding
Yeah.
AICHR maybe, or some things that you realized or you would like to share
Well,
as a human rights advocate?
the good thing is now, because of this pandemic, it is easy also to follow things through the social media, right? So
Mm-hmm.
please look at the social media of the AICHR now. I think some Indonesian AICHR are very active with the social media, and the next issue they're going to discuss is the end of this month on freedom of religions, actually the implementation of certain article on freedom of religions or belief, 30 September. And I myself will organize a Southeast Asia freedom of religions or belief in Bali, in the at time of the how do it be 1 week or 2 weeks before the meeting of the head of state of G20. So freedom of religions or belief in Southeast Asia is one of the priority issues in the context of all 10 member ASEAN countries.
Oh, that's very nice. Then we look forward to that, Mr. Rafendi. You mentioned a while ago the website of AICHR, yes?
Yes,
And
website
its
of
social
AICHR,
media
and then
accounts.
also check the website of C4, Southeast Asia Freedom of Religions and Belief .org. Yeah, so check these two. You will find the activities of AICHR and then the C4 conference.
All right. Well, on that note, we would like to thank you, Mr. Rafendi, for your time. That's all for today's episode for ASEAN People Speak 2. Thank you all for listening, and thank you so much to our speaker, to our guest for tonight, Mr. Rafendi, all the way from Indonesia. Thank you for giving us wonderful insights about AICHR, your experiences, and how human rights really have evolved in the ASEAN region. Thank you also for giving us your perspective on things, and we certainly learned a lot. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Join us again next week for another episode of ASEAN People Speak Season 2. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast on Spotify so you never miss an episode. Also, subscribe to our Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube channel at WUG ASEAN HR MEC, and visit the website at ASEANHRMEC.org. Again, this has been your host for tonight, Regine Jessica Abuel, saying good night, everybody, and thank you all for listening. Bye-bye. Stay safe.